the Historic Preservation Commission meeting of Ames for Monday, August the 8th. We're ready to go. So, do we have an approval of the agenda?
I move approval of the agenda.
I'll second.
Second, okay, moved and seconded. So we have an agenda for the evening. Approval of the minutes. Have everybody had a chance to look those over?
I move approval of the minutes.
Second.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Okay, the public forum. We have time set aside in our agenda for a public forum for public comments on topics that would be of concern to the Historic Preservation Commission, other than those on the agenda. We may limit each speaker to 5 minutes. Please understand that the commission is not likely to take any action on comments at this meeting due to requirements of the Open Meetings Law, but could do so, or may do so in the future. Do we have anyone who wants to make comments? I don't know if we have a guest today. No? Okay, well, moving on to the next agenda item. Continuing our task of reviewing Chapter 31, we're up to Section 10, and I hope you had a chance to look it over. We're kind of at the part where we're getting into the responsibilities of the commission, and it's the certification of appropriateness, which is a big piece of what we review, that the city directs us to make comment and recommendation. This was kind of a more complex section because it's kind of gets into the meat and potatoes of what we look at. So Section 10, does anybody have any comments starting out that they want to, we can go by each section down the row, and staff has provided their comments along with the edits that have been looked over by other commission members. So Section 1 is the certification of appropriateness. Preliminary, it was the basically a question for discussion is that does this require a permit, and how is this administered, and does the statement allow for regulation of non-permit activities such as painting? So we had simplified the language to every application for a building permit or demolition permit affecting the exterior appearance of a designated landmark or of any contributing historic resource within a designated historic district shall be accompanied by an application for a certificate of appropriateness. Applicants shall be required to submit plans, drawings, elevations, specifications, and other information as may be necessary to make a decision. The building official shall not issue a building or demolition permit until a certificate of appropriateness has been approved. Discussion at this point, and it sounds like Ray, you had several.
I think staff had kind of clarified.
Some of this, right?
It talks about building permits, but not every application for a certificate of appropriateness requires a building permit.
Right.
Like a fence, for example, doesn't. And so we felt like leaving that first paragraph in there makes it more clear and doesn't make it sound so much like it's just if you need a building permit. Because we do need certificates of appropriateness for things that people aren't even applying for a building permit. So we thought leaving that first paragraph in there maybe helped that. Did you want to talk about that at all?
Did you have a comment, Mary Jo? It looks like.
Yeah, Uh, So how do you determine what things that don't require a permit?
Well, if there are design guidelines for it, then it requires a permit. So, uh, under the next column here, there's that statement. Does this statement allow regulation of non-permit activities such as painting? Well, the design guidelines don't address painting at all.
Mhm.
So we don't regulate painting. But if it's the design of a window or you're doing something with the siding or the roof, those things are addressed. So we really go by the design guidelines to know whether or not they need a certificate of appropriateness.
So is it something that someone would come in to zoning for, like a fence? Does that require zoning review and not a building permit?
A fence does not require review unless it's in the historic district.
So how do people know that they have to come in and get a certificate of appropriateness?
For a certificate of appropriateness,
Mm-hmm.
well, they usually check with us, but
But someone that doesn't know, that's moved into the neighborhood and doesn't know.
well, yeah, and that's true with about any code, any part of the zoning code. People putting in driveways, they can put them in the wrong place if they
Mhm.
don't check the code or check with us first. There's a number of things beyond historic preservation that require that people either, look it up in the code or check with us, and we're happy to help them if they check with us. They don't like it and we don't like it for them.
Mhm.
If they do something that then has to be changed or removed and it's going to cost them money, nobody likes that. And we don't get any joy out of doing that either. But so we encourage people to check with us. And the code is online if they want to read the code. We get calls, going back to fences, we get calls on fences all the time, probably every day, especially, during the warmer months. And so starting about March, we start getting calls about fences, and that continues probably until November. We get a lot of calls on fences, how high can I build my fence? Where can I put my fence? Are there restrictions on materials? And, it's different for a corner lot. So we even say somewhere on our website about a corner lot, contact us if it's a corner lot, because those regulations are a little more complex for a fence.
So is that in a historic district or outside of the district? That people would call to see if they needed a permit?
Well, yeah,
Normal.
people call about fences wherever they live in
Okay,
Ames. Yeah,
but there's no regulation except in the historic
it
district?
doesn't require a permit.
Okay, there's no height limits or setback?
There is a height limit. Yeah, I mean, there are restrictions, but you don't need a building permit for it.
Okay, but it requires zoning approval.
Well, if you meet there's not a formal approval process except in the historic district. And there are some other restrictions for the area up in Somerset for that village zoning.
Right.
They do need approval for that. But for the most part, they don't need zoning approval, but we prefer that they contact us or at least look at the code before they do the fence.
Mhm.
Because we don't want them to have to take anything out or redo it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's kind of what the concern, I think, is that it's overly restrictive for the historic district to have to comply with something that's not reviewed elsewhere in the city at all.
Well,
If-
historic districts are, I mean, it's not a place where everyone wants to buy a home because it is more restrictive. You know, there are more regulations that go along with it. Some people like that because they're concerned about doing what's in character with the homes in that area.
Mhm.
And they also like it because then they know what their neighbor's going to be able to do or not do. So yeah, it is more restrictive for fences in the historic district, but that's because we're trying to maintain that architectural character.
Yeah, well, I think that's sort of an old view of historic district. I know this code was written several years ago, but I think that's one of the commission's concern is that we're putting people through more headaches than need to be done. And I think we have a question of how much of an impact something like a fence really has. If it's, say, if there's already a height limit in the code, then restricting it and otherwise, I think that's what we're concerned about with that part of the
Well, for example, you know, if it's a vinyl fence, we don't allow vinyl fences. We don't allow vinyl siding
anywhere or in the district,
in the district.
in the district,
In the
right?
district, yeah,
Well,
because that material is not the historic material.
right.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's the issue that we're concerned about is the fact that the fence and say where a driveway is replaced, you know, flat concrete work, if that's something that gets reviewed in the district that doesn't require a permit, that whether it really is that, you know, if we should be looking at that.
Well, concrete work, you know, say a driveway, that doesn't have separate regulations in the historic district. That applies wherever you are in Ames.
Mhm.
So, for example, you know, parking a car, paving a spot to park your car in the front yard in front of your house. Presently, that's not allowed,
Right.
whether you're in the historic district or anywhere else.
Mhm.
Um,
I guess, so really what regulates it now is the district specifies that fences would be reviewed. Is that correct?
It does, yeah.
Okay.
Mhm. And there's certain designs and materials that are allowed.
Mhm.
You know, there's quite a wide range of designs that are allowed.
Okay. Well,
So-
okay, yeah, that, you know, I just wanted to get the staff's, you know, reasoning behind all of it, but
Yeah.
from, you know, I think we don't want to change the ordinance that much, but I think mostly it's looking at making it more democratic and not so restrictive for people and having them to go through this process when it's something that's not going to have that much of an impact. I mean, I think, you know, we definitely want to protect the historic buildings from having vinyl siding put on them or windows being changed out, but adding a fence to the backyard, it really, I just, to me, we don't need to spend time on.
Well, you know, there's fences in the front yard too. They can't be
Right.
as high, but
Right, I know,
Yeah.
but especially in the backyard, I don't know why we would be
Yeah.
reviewing fences. So if there's a historic fence, I think we need to preserve that, work to preserve that. But if somebody wants to put up a little white picket fence in front of their house, it's not going to impact the house. And I just,
And-
those are my concerns with a
And
fence
we
or
would
anything
allow a
else.
white picket fence.
It will allow white
Yeah.
picket fence.
Yeah, we would allow that, yeah.
Okay.
But they have to get a certificate of appropriateness for it. And there's no cost. So, we can approve that as staff, actually.
Yeah.
So, um,
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
So if we were to take that out, the only impact would be about fences, or would the other impact beyond fences that if we took that first paragraph out?
I'd have to think about it more probably to see what other things there are that we have design guidelines for that would not require a building permit.
I was trying to run through like what a roof, that would require a permit.
Right.
Replacing windows would require a permit, right?
Well, I think there are some cases where windows would not require a permit. But I could certainly check with building inspection and see, which of the things they require permits on. But yeah, I think there are some instances where you're replacing the window in the same opening that you have. You may not need a building permit. I need to check on that to be sure, but the point I was trying to make is, there are cases where it doesn't require a building permit, but you'd still need a certificate of appropriateness. So I felt that removing that first paragraph makes it sound like if you don't need a building permit, you don't need to get a certificate of appropriateness. And in most cases, that's true, but not all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think that needs to be explored further because I think we need to find out exactly what requires a permit because.
Okay, yeah, I can find that out.
I mean, if it doesn't cover window replacement, that's definitely something we'd want to make sure that we reviewed. So, and then maybe we need to, I think when we've been talking about doing citywide design guidelines for any historic district that may come up in the future. So that would be something that we also would need to know at that point, what's required as far as permitting for other things too.
Okay. Yeah. One thing that I think we need more discussion on, Eloise and I were talking about this, and probably the next meeting before we go through more sections is, there's some new terminology the commission is suggesting, and I think we all need to understand what that really means and what we're trying to comply with and what we wouldn't comply with. Like building, definition of structure, definition of contributing structure, which you're suggesting that actually that would be taken out.
No, I don't think that's. Oh, but that's using historic resources instead of structure.
Change it to contributing historic resource.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were concerned because throughout the ordinance, it's in one place it says a structure is like a garage or something like that. It doesn't, and it is just not clear there. So we kind of thought the historic resource might replace both structure and building if that worked. But again, this is something that's kind of preliminary looking at it.
Yeah, and
so
the other thing we're wondering about, historic resource, and it includes things beyond, the buildings. It can
right,
include,
that can be landscape.
some object or some landscape feature, and then, does that code section actually seem to fit for that type of yeah, an item, you know.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we actually, I think, talked about that
Yeah.
last week. So,
Right.
too. So that does need to be flushed out to is what works best.
Yeah.
And be more clear on defining those words too. So,
So one of the things that we were looking at by looking at historic resource is broadening it, because anticipating maybe some changes when we're looking at some of the design elements for the Chautauqua Park, Ridgewood Park area, where sometimes landscaping may actually be a contributing factor. So,
And we're just saying, we all need to, know what it is we're actually talking about.
right.
mm,
If you want to regulate landscaping, we need to know that.
It would be, well, right, and it
Yeah.
would be particular to a district, let's put it that way, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
That's something that we did find very, as we were going through, it seemed like it would be flipping around with the terminology, and some consistency needed to be in place. So that might be something that we can flag then for first year. So for our next discussion, actually, the next time might be a good time to maybe go over definitions again. maybe.
Yeah, that's what
that sound
Eloise and
like-
I were talking about, maybe go over
Okay.
some definitions, and because I know some of the definitions you're proposing come from the federal regulations, and some of the regulations we refer to are the local,
Right.
zoning regulations, and sometimes they don't quite match up.
And would that all be determined then in that front part of the section where it has definitions, where we would
Yes.
then clarify at that point?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Are there any other comments?
I have a question. Ray, I've been kind of making a list of ideas in my own mind that I've wondered as a resident of Old Town whether I needed a certificate or not,
Oh, okay.
that have to do with kind of small homeowner type projects, like maybe a chicken coop or a garden structure, or maybe like even a small exterior alteration that isn't major enough to have a design guideline, like maybe just an awning over the doorway. Can we talk a little bit about where those fall into the COA process, if they require one or not? I'm curious.
The awning would.
Okay.
The awning would.
Is that because it's attached?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the chicken coop, it probably depends on the design of it. If it would have a roof, then it would be a structure. And if it's 120 square feet or more, then it's, part of what's regulated in the historic district regulations. What was the other one?
Like a garden structure or an outdoor fireplace, maybe smaller elements that don't meet that 120 square foot footprint, but
Yeah.
might be noticeable.
An outdoor fireplace, probably not. Zoning regulations kick in there too. If you were to have it if you wanted it in your front yard, you could have a problem having it in your front yard. Not that you necessarily would, but, structures are restricted in the front yard. But I don't think probably need a certificate of appropriateness for that. Well, and you had an item on the agenda last month that, triggered some of the regulations about fences. So sometimes part of what you're proposing may require a certificate of appropriateness, and the rest maybe not. So, if it's unusual, sometimes we got to look at it on a case-by-case basis and kind of see what the regulations say. It's impossible to write regulations that address every single thing, you know? And
Mhm.
usually when you adopt a new regulation, the first thing that comes up is something that's not covered. It's like, oh, we didn't think of that.
And that makes total sense. Yeah. There's
Yeah.
always going to be fringe cases.
Yes,
Um,
yes, yes, yeah.
And
I
maybe
mean,
this fits into your comment that you just made, that going and honing in those definitions of building and structures and other words that we've used will really help tighten that up.
Yeah,
So that,
yeah, just so we're all on the same page, you
Right.
know? Uh, um, So, and understand implications if we change terminology and,
Right.
thank you.
Any other comments that someone might need to?
So I find it interesting, Angie, that you're asking that question. And so most residents of Old Town, when they have any of those random thoughts, they're just coming to the city and just asking them, hey, do I need to get a certificate for this particular project or whatever it is? And that's how it usually works. as a
yeah,
process.
in almost all cases, they do. Sometimes someone will start something that's covered by the regulations, and then we need to talk to them before they get too far.
Okay.
And say, hold up, you need a certificate of appropriateness to do this. But I mean, people are pretty good about checking. They really
Yeah.
are.
It seems like it relies on the neighborhood group to kind of make sure that the residents are educated that you are in a historic district, and you may want to check on things before. I
Yeah.
think there was an instance a year or so ago where somebody clueless that they were in a historic district, So hard to believe, but but it can happen,
Yeah, it can.
Yeah,
it
it can
can.
happen.
That's
Yeah.
not unusual. That's
And,
not-
a lot of times when someone's buying a house, they'll check with us to, if I bought this house, I'd want to, add a garage or,
Right.
add this addition to it, what would I need to do to get that approved? And
Realtors aren't necessarily a good source for, you would think that they might, inform a potential buyer, but not always the case.
they usually tell their clients to contact us and find out. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, shall we move on to the second item, which was, again, extensive kind of a rewrite of the alteration definition to where the recommendation was to say alteration in the same format as it was in the earlier definition sections. A certificate of appropriateness shall be permitted in the following instances. And then it has the following A, B, C through D. But basically it would be changing that the alteration part, having the definition moved to the definition section of the chapter 31. Did I say that correctly? When we were talking about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and in that table on the side too, it says
Right.
definition is in quote mark. It should be alteration.
Yeah, it should be. It should be. That was a typo on my part. The first sentence defining the word, and then in quotes, it should be say alteration should be moved to the definition section. Yeah. So, the section, basically, again, it was clarification, types of editing for A, B, C, and D. D was new text that seemed to be something that would currently not in the ordinance, but could add to the understanding. D reads, in each instance, the commission may grant exemptions to the requirements for an alteration if it determines that the cost of complying with the design guideline is an economic hardship to the property owner. Now, there is a reference later on in this particular part of the chapter about hardship, but it felt like having that additional items D would be kind of helpful in understanding. Are there any further comments or questions about this part 2?
Well, I was looking at staff.
Right, the term in kind is a requirement.
I was going to ask you about that. It looks like one of those things where you're going to the federal regulations as opposed to the local, whatever. Is that what that is?
Well, when the committee met, Angie and
Mhm.
Susan and I, we were thinking that the certificate of appropriateness review starts with staff, and there should be some things that the staff can just review automatically. So that's kind of what we ended up with A and B being things that staff could just automatically approve, rather than that coming to the commission. But then we kind of got off on another idea of well, I guess I think we were just thinking maybe some of the other wording needed to be tightened up a little bit for which we hadn't done until we met the other day, and it doesn't show it in there, but that I think that is the main thing in that section, that we felt like that meant that anything that couldn't be approved by staff automatically would come to be an application for certificate of appropriateness. So and I'm not sure that's an appropriate thing to do in that section either. So that's something we kind of questioned. So I think, would it be helpful to kind of outline a plan on what we're doing? Would that be helpful to staff?
Yeah, it would.
Okay. Well,
Where are we going with this, huh?
yeah, we decided to barge ahead with ordinance revisions because we really felt it needed it in a lot of ways. When Ted was on the commission too, he has a lot of background in regulating, the historic district, and it just didn't seem like it was very user-friendly, and that it just had a lot of stuff in it that maybe didn't complicated it or made it so restrictive that it really didn't give much leeway in a review process for where the commission could say grant a certificate of economic hardship or that sort of thing. Or if someone had trouble, needed to replace windows, wanted to replace windows, and considering the cost of repairing the windows, if we did some changing, then we could have more options. Like a person, you could say, okay, the ones that are visible from the right of way, just, those should be repaired. And then the others, if it's cheaper to replace, that sort of thing. It just gives, I think we're looking for more flexibility as well in the review process. So it was not so frightening to an applicant that didn't have the money to do what they thought they might have to do. So anyway, when we started the committee, we just kind of started going through what we thought needed to be done, and with input from Ted too. But in working with Eloise, and I think you sent comments in previous meetings, and last week we talked with Eloise, and we kind of realized we need to have, when we have our committee meetings, that staff needs to be involved as well. So I think we're just kind of working through the processes in kind of I don't know. And it can be better, and that'll be really helpful, I think, if we have meetings if staff can meet with us before it comes to the commission, and then have a little bit more time if there's more, if we wanted to do more revisions before we brought it to the commission. So, and then I think that ultimately, when we get through the whole thing, we've got to go through it again probably for more consistency, like the defining structure and building and historic resource, and then somehow getting this on to the ultimately to the city council. So,
Mhm.
so that's kind of what we're thinking right now. I think what we have all been thinking right now as far as
Right.
the process.
Okay. Yeah, that
Actually,
helps.
excuse me. Sorry, did you want to go ahead?
I'm sorry.
Did you have something to say first?
No, you
No.
go ahead.
I was just going to say that as a new member, that's really useful to hear what the big picture is, because I've been struggling a little bit with this
Okay.
process. I mean, I try and study up for it, and then I find myself bogged down in language. So that's really useful to hear the purpose. Tied to that, what you just said about usability and TED. And last month, Edith pointed out in your discussion how TED would also argue for livability
Mhm.
in historic neighborhoods. And one more thought, and this is very untechnical and unprofessional, but one thought is, as someone who doesn't, when a member of the public comes to this process and obviously, presumably doesn't know the federal standards, which you're trying to align with more, to me, historic resource makes far less intuitive sense than structure, because the word resource can be papers and books and all sorts of things. So turning to some definitions would be really useful. So up front, if you're using historic resource, and I know there's further comments from city staff, there would be a clear definition of what's meant.
Mhm.
So,
Right.
but anyway, it was useful for you to go through that.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay, good.
Thank you, Mary Jo.
I also
Really does
think
help.
that getting together with staff and the commission to kind of go through the process together, so you're not reporting it back and then reporting it back, would speed up that process a lot, because you would understand the point of view from the city
Mhm.
versus where the
Exactly.
point of view, and just
Yeah.
speed it up a little bit. So I don't know if that's a possibility.
I think it would be helpful to get together so we kind of know where you're coming from. Sometimes it's hard to put in writing what you're really
Yeah.
thinking. I mean, I'm not faulting the people on that committee, but I mean, it's it's difficult for us too to put all our thoughts in writing so that it's clearly communicated. Like some of these comments I was writing up for this meeting, I had Eloise look at them and she goes, "Well, these three make no sense to me." Like, okay, well, that's good to know.
I think one of the things we need to also realize is we started this, 6 months or more ago? I think actually putting the ordinance in Google Docs. Angie helped us do that. So it is accessible to everyone through Google Docs with the edits from earlier comments, Ted, Mary Jo, me, all that. This is just, Susan, when we did that originally and we made the edits, it screwed up the layout of the printed out version. So we were losing track of where we were and the numbering was off and stuff like that. So this, putting it in a table format was just me, trying to make it more readable. But the comments, 95%, I would say, are the same as were done back in January. Really, this is not new added information. Now, as we sit down and look at it, deciding, okay, let's do a chunk at this meeting, we say, okay, what part, when we've read this through, doesn't seem to hang? What are the questions we would have? And that's what we bring to the agenda, is the questions that have popped up in our conversation, which, we can do it all here, but because we can only have, 3 people at a committee meeting.
Mm-hmm.
But we thought it would be too much to drag down if we all sat down and read it and brought it to the question. So we might have to figure out a format. I mean, we're getting into some other heavy sections here when we hit the design criteria, design guidelines sections are very long, very detailed, you know. As we're working with that Certified Local Government grant, doing the intensive survey, we can see there's going to be additions that are going to need to be added to the ordinance based on that new district, hopefully, that will get approved. But I mean, that's part of the livability of the ordinance, you know, that it can adapt to whatever the changes are as we grow. So I don't know. I think, you know, we can meet with staff, you know, as a committee of 3, and I'm welcome to step back and let, you know, if somebody wants to visit, you know, with staff and listen in as we're going through all this for the next session, you know, happy to do that. I'll still probably be doing this because I can't read it if it's not in a table format, you know. But I do want people to be involved, and I really appreciate the comments and that people are, you know, taking it as something that is a worthwhile effort. So,
Yeah, I think, yeah, we are getting into more complicated sections, and I think that, I think that adding staff to our meetings before we bring it to the whole
Right.
commission is really,
We could
is
do
going to
that.
help us kind of take control of it. So I think, I see us going through the whole thing again too.
yeah, at the end when
At
it all
the
hangs
end.
together, yeah.
So that's not, I think going through it this one time is not going to be the end of it. So at least I don't see a rush in it. So there's no reason we need to set a deadline of like the 1st of next year or anything like that to have a new ordinance. So, and it might even require a public meeting with people in the district.
Oh, yeah,
Or if we have another district by then, because it would be affecting them. So it might be appropriate to get public comments as well.
yeah.
So I think we just are kind of plodding along with, starting at the beginning and kind of just seeing where we can get with it.
So this section was basically our job as a commission. The certificate of appropriateness, it's why we exist, is to provide comment to the city on that. And then the next section after this is called the application. What people who will go to this ordinance when they realize they need to get a certificate, what they need to do for that. So we can finish this one, section 10, and then maybe agree to meet with staff at least 2 weeks before, so in another 2 weeks
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
to give enough time for us all to, if we chunk it, it's not too much to read at any one time. So.
Yeah. Because, for us, depending on what else is going on, sometimes we have a hard time,
Right.
getting it put together in a couple of days.
And I wasn't really thinking about that when I was providing this table format, is I was just, waiting until we had a chance to meet and then, slapping it into a table. But if at any point anybody wants to preview what's coming up the next round, you go to the Google Docs and you can read the comments. They're all there. It's the same information pretty much. So you don't have to wait until you see it in the packet handout. So we can continue the discussion for this particular section then. Does anybody have anything further on section 2? If not, we'll go to 3, which is new construction, which basically that was a lot of word tweaking that maybe will be part of the discussion of which is the right terminology to use to help people understand. There was one change, I think, was it the, under 3 on page 2, ABC, number C, I think a new accessory building over 120 square feet was added to the language.
And the city had a response to that.
Right.
It's 120, not over 120.
Right.
Mhm.
Let's see what that was. Following through C applies to more than, shall be compatible with the architectural styles. Is that the part that you're thinking? The paragraph following 3C applies to more than just new construction. City staff would suggest moving it under 3110.1 or some other section of chapter 31. With the paragraph changed or to and for design guidelines and add identification criteria after design guidelines. So that would be this paragraph that comes right after C, I'm understanding, correct? Where a new
Yes,
principal
yeah, top of the
structure
next page, yep.
shall be compatible with the architectural styles in the district. I think it is period. An application for certificate of appropriateness shall be reviewed in accordance with the Secretary of Interior's standards for rehabilitation of a historic building. And then we referenced the section, it's just, I think the file, 2 sections later, 31.12. I think that's a typo. I think it's 31.12 for the design guidelines, and then the specified guidelines for the designated landmarks and historic districts would be 31, probably 14. So you're thinking move those into up front? Is that what you're thinking for the?
Yeah, Eloise and I talked about it, and we said, maybe before that number 1, or,
Okay,
we were wondering if that was the right place or if another place is the right place, but we just thought
That makes-
it ought to be maybe moved to a different
to make it
spot.
hang better with the
Since it
information.
applied to more than just new construction.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea because that does. It would-
So, it may be, the right place before number 1, or, maybe it needs to be in another section. That's something we could think about.
That would be definitely something to consider, yeah. Again, until you start digging into these and reading them, and everything, well, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So. Any other comments for this part on new construction? No? We'll jump to 4, demolition.
Excuse me.
Sure.
Are we just going to hold off from the point that the city gave about don't change principal structure to historic resource because of the zoning ordinance doesn't allow an accessory building on the property without a principal structure? Are we just going to not discuss that because you're going to be
No.
meeting with the staff? Because
Yeah, we can discuss
That
it.
seems a big point,
Mhm.
since it's in the zoning ordinance.
So that part is the principal structure. Where is that? Yes.
As long as we're doing that, can we clarify point A
Mm-hmm.
first?
A new principal structure in a historic district.
So your comments on here make sense, but staff's comments also make sense, even though it's a question.
No, this is where we bring this up. So what's the what's the purpose of adding in a historic district to number A? And I think it was because the thinking was that new construction would be, you wouldn't be applying certificate of appropriateness
For new construction.
construction outside of a historic district. I mean, the only reason why it's
Well, an individual landmark
will be in and
You're
of itself.
you're probably not going to be doing,
Probably,
No
but is
princi-
it impossible?
it isn't impossible. No, you could have a huge farm, maybe, where you could do another principal. But you say a principal, how is a principal structure defined in the zoning code?
Hang on just a second.
I just felt these two different points were linked, so.
Very good.
Mhm.
No, that's fine. Sometimes we look at it too much.
Okay, principal means any building, structure, or portion thereof which is used for or use which is conducted for the primary purpose of the lot on which it is located. So, for example, in a residential zone, the house is the principal structure. If it's a detached garage, that's an accessory structure.
Okay.
Yeah,
So whatever it's zoned for?
yeah, yeah, well, yeah, the primary use, the primary use in that zone
Mhm.
for that location, in the historic district, the primary use is the house.
So,
And you couldn't, for example, not just in the historic district, but anywhere in Ames, you can't take a lot and just build a detached garage on it. Because the detached garage is accessory to principal structure. It's not the primary use of the lot. It's accessory to the primary use. Does
mhm, mhm, okay.
that make sense?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we were just thinking that if you were the new construction would be well, either an addition can be new construction too. So, but for a new structure that's a principal structure, I can't think of it outside of a historic district where it would even come into, I mean, a vacant lot in a historic district, that's what this applies to, I think. And I don't know if that's captures everything or not, but
Because anything outside a district is the structure itself and
Right.
not the lot it's part of. Is that what you're saying?
right,
okay.
that the,
The standalone.
say the Martin House is an individual landmark. You're not going to build another primary structure there unless you tear that one down.
Right.
So to me, the new construction of a primary structure is probably only going to apply in a historic district. I mean, I don't think you need to have that there, but
The only thing is that we don't have any commercial historic districts in our guidelines.
Right.
That would change.
Yeah. The ordinance doesn't apply to commercial.
It's all residential. So in that regard,
yeah. So I mean, that's kind of the idea behind that putting, and it doesn't really matter if in a historic district's in there because it would apply overall anyway. So I think it's just for
Clarity.
better information for a homeowner that's looking at the ordinance.
so
And then,
this is the part that we were just talking about.
and Rosemary had a question about C, I think.
question about this one.
Yes, do not change principal structure to historic resource. The zoning ordinance does not allow an accessory building on the property without a principal structure. And that seems like a big point, but I'm happy to defer the discussion for you to have
No, that's,
in the committee.
But I think it's just the definitions, right? Historic
again, it's
resource
part
can
of
be-
that definitions that we have to clarify
Right.
where we
Mhm.
use it. And that's definitely one of the spots,
That'd be a big difference.
Mhm,
where it would make a
exactly.
difference.
Yeah.
I think a lot of this one, we have that kind of, in this section, where we're trying to say whether there's a resource, there's a structure, when do you use building. So they're,
Yeah.
it's peppered all the way through this.
So what we're saying is that this still needs to be reviewed.
That would still be something that we would be
Yeah.
reviewing. Yeah, still under review. Are there further comments that we need to? I don't want to roll over stuff that, people are going, hey, wait a minute, so please do holler. Okay, demolition, same thing, demolition. Then, again, we've got the historic building resource push-pull for consistency.
So that's something we can talk about. at the
Yeah, I'm
meeting.
thinking mostly
Yeah.
demolition is pretty straightforward. It's just using the terminology that makes the most sense, right?
Right.
The rest of the items
Yep.
about what's required for estimating cost, value, property, blah, blah, blah. All that is remaining the same. And it goes through items A through L, and then determining the economic hardship for demolition. It has a separate section for that, paragraph for that. Then it goes, to any further comments about demolition that people might have a question just yet, or we can always. The next section is specific to the demolition of contributing garages. And this is something that is particular to the Old Town District, apparently. We found out, Elizabeth was telling us that that's something that was definitely something of concern in that part. So the demolition of contributing garages, the commission does not, the staff comment is the commission does not determine whether a garage is considered contributing. This
Yep.
is established by the site inventory sheet for the particular property as described in the 2003 historic survey of properties in the Old Town District, which is true. That's kind of our baseline of what is contributing and non-contributing. So I
Yeah.
think sometimes contributing, like if you have something that's been buggered up, considering somebody goes to the trouble to replace and return a property where it could become contributing, that's a whole different thing, but this is just specific to demolition of contributing. They don't want you to wholesale
So I
demolish.
think, since we had our meeting too, I was thinking about where this is in the code. It seems if it applies to Old Town, I'm wondering if
Should
it
it say
shouldn't
something?
be moved to the section that applies to Old Town that's later on. I don't know what the number is, but
Under the
I,
design criteria, design guidelines?
yes, under the design guide, that seems like if that applies specifically to Old Town, that it maybe needs to be moved to
Hang
that
with the Old
section.
Town information.
hmm
Which part does?
The
Number
demolition of
5.
contributing garages, since that really applies to only Old Town, if that shouldn't be under the
No, we
guidelines
possibly
for-
will have contributing garages in
I was just
the
gonna say that.
survey.
Right,
for-
right. But they also are supposed to come up with their own design guidelines too. So it would be in their design guidelines if they wanted it. So,
Any of the historic
So-
landmark houses, do they have contributing garages that sort of impact?
I don't
I don't
The
know.
I think there are only 2 residences that are
The Martin
landmarks,
House
right?
And another one. I can't think of what it is.
The Adams house.
And-
Adams house.
I'm just not familiar with if they have a.
That's
Right.
something to check.
So, yeah, and I think the question was whether or not, why the commission needs to review whether or not it's a contributing garage if it's already determined in the historic district designation that it's contributing. So that's a step that seems like it's unnecessary. So I think those are the 2 main issues with that section.
Whether it stays up here or is it something that hangs with particular to the district?
To the Old Town District, yeah. And really, when you look at that, it's curious that there's a whole section on criteria for determining whether you can demolish a contributing garage when there's no guidance on reviewing a demolition of a primary structure. So that's kind of curious.
Oh, no guidance on the demolition of a principal structure?
Right.
That's the part before the garage. That's that,
Number 4.
In,
But are you talking about just the architectural integrity
Mhm.
thing?
There was a demolition one.
yeah, but it's very short. I mean, it's not, you don't have all of the findings that you have for the garage.
Maybe because it's more obvious with a house than it might be. with these
That's probably it, but
garages.
yeah. But from a legal standpoint, if you're going to have it that prescribed for a garage, it probably should be apply to a primary structure. But, that's something I think we need to consider in change or, any kind of revisions there. Is whether or not we should have those findings apply to any demolition to whether it's a house or a garage or whatever.
if I understand you correctly, in the current ordinance under demolition, this is before you get to the next part that talks about garages, the demolition of existing principal structures that are contributing structures or of a historic landmark shall be strictly prohibited except in the following instance.
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes on and then you need to prove economic hardship, and there's things you can submit to prove economic hardship, and then the commission determines
Yeah.
there's
Okay.
an economic hardship.
Yeah.
I mean, that is talking about the principal structure.
Yeah. It's just kind of it just is worded differently that where I'm.
You're talking more about the architectural integrity and structural condition?
I think so.
Mhm.
That is interesting.
So.
So you could ruin the entire architectural integrity of a contributing principal structure pretty darn easily.
Mhm.
And I don't
Yeah.
think obviousness is, even if it is obvious, it should still be laid out there, like you said, for legal
Mhm.
reasons. Yeah.
Yes, I wasn't. I was just throwing that out
Yeah.
as an excuse,
Right,
not
right.
arguing for.
Yeah, because you could
Yeah.
say, okay, you made this finding for a garage, but you didn't make it for this principal structure. If somebody got real picky about it.
So you could basically remove a house, a residence, the principal structure from being contributing to being non-contributing by just doing a few. Now, granted, we're supposed to do the certificate of appropriateness, which prohibits supposedly any of those kinds of drastic changes.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I just think we need to probably make some, probably have a little bit more discussion on that at some point.
Yeah, we
At
certainly
least,
can.
yeah, because at least propose maybe a way it should be changed to, rather than it may need, like moving it to another section, that sort of thing. I think we probably need to have more, just look at those two parts and tighten that up a bit.
Yeah, we can talk more about that.
He did get the permission to knock down the principal structure, but not the garage.
There you go.
Yeah.
Take
Yeah.
the garage out.
It got to be too much of a pain. I'm just going to live in the garage now. Okay. So we'll kind of defer those, table those to more discussion as something that we need to revisit for the demolition and demolition of contributing garages. Let's see. Relocation, number 6 section. Relocation is the relocation of a historic landmark or of a contributing historic resource within a historic district or moving a building into a historic district shall be strictly prohibited except in the following instances. These are kind of rare situations, but they do occur. So, what have you got? City said prefer retain the wording of the paragraph for relocation as written. So there must be a reason why you really kind of need this to say. Again, there's a lot of this historic resources versus structure, but relocating within a historic district or moving a building into a historic district. I think that's mostly determining what wordage, building structure.
I guess I've come upon a recurring theme with my comments, but what about historic landmarks that are not in historic districts? Do we care about moving,
Well-
relocating those?
Yeah, it would, a relocation of a historic landmark or of a contributing historic resource. Yeah, that's often sometimes the last resort to save a landmark is to move it.
But then the next line says within a district or into a district. What if it's not even just moving the landmark somewhere else?
Somewhere else.
Didn't they do that to the school that the museum uses?
Yeah,
I forget the name. of the school.
Hoggett School, yeah. They moved it to a Meeker Elementary playground area. So it retains its landmark.
Well, right, but I'm saying we don't need the
Determination, but
section that
yeah.
says within or into a district.
Well, now into a district is part of the language that the city would like to retain. So we're gonna defer to you, Ray, on the relocation part. You with us here on relocating relocation of a historic landmark within a district or moving into a historic district. And we have a question like, what if you move it like Hoggett School just into a location? Is that little corner where Hoggett School now considered like the landmark?
No, it's not.
Okay,
Could be just the building itself.
Well, there's been no designation by the council of that as a landmark.
Okay, bad example then.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt it's historic.
right.
It hasn't been designated as
Oh,
a
it's not
landmark.
landmark.
Okay,
Well, just the Martin House is probably a good example of a building that could be considered for moving because of it being, of
Right
its
off of Lincoln
zoning
Way.
and, and it's more threatened. And if there was an option, well, if somebody wanted to build a commercial building there, which would be more profitable, and what prohibits them from demolishing it. And, you know, if you have this relocation clause covering a procedure that would possibly save the building by moving it, then say into a historic district, there's a process for the national program for when it's appropriate to move, when it retains its historic significance. And using that as a guideline, then it would help the commission determine whether that would be an appropriate thing to approve. So.
Well,
I
it
don't
gives
know if
us
that-
choices, A, B, and C, correct? As it can be relocated to original site of construction, but like you said, in this case, the closest would be like C, could be moved within or into a district of, basically, it sounds like a comparable architectural style identified in that district, or it can be relocated to a vacant parcel or parcel occupied by a non-contributing building. But that's
Well, in the case.
not necessarily in
Yeah,
the district.
In the case of the Martin House, the
That would not.
relocation maybe would be the only alternative to demolition.
Mhm.
So,
But the way this reads, it only matters if it's relocating into a historic district. What if we just move it down the street?
It would be by B, relocation is an alternative to demolition, and then basically is where
Okay.
would we move it
But
to?
I'm concentrating on the first section.
Oh,
yeah, I see what you're saying.
oh,
Then that doesn't, it's a little bit in inconsistency, I think, that, let's see, you'd have to say under 6 relocation, that section applies to relocation of a historic landmark. Well, that includes that though.
Just as within a historic district or moving to a district, and I think that's what needs to be changed.
right,
Yeah,
or into,
relocation of a historic landmark or of a contributing historic resource within a historic district. Yeah, I think that, no, what's the question again? I don't see
Or
how
moving a
that-
building into this. Okay, yeah, never mind. It's there already.
So that, I think that covers
except in the
everything.
following instances.
Page break got me confused.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, okay.
And
It
that's
is
where
still
it would go,
confusing.
it would default to B, where basically we have to move it to save it, which, Martin House would probably be the one that's the most likely in the future be threatened. So the city staff definitely, they kind of like it the way it is, guys. Except for, but again, this would be where the only wordage changes that we'd be looking at, it seems like would be the primarily the structure building.
Yeah, why do you prefer leaving it the way it is?
You prefer it the way you rewrote it?
Yeah, because I think it's more specific. It covers everything. It covers moving an individual landmark. It includes moving a contributing historic building outside the district, and it includes moving a building into a vacant lot in a historic district. So that includes everything, whereas the way it's stated, it doesn't include, it definitely doesn't include moving a building into a historic district, does it? I can't tell either with all the red and the crossouts and,
See where buildings are too big, it could be moved into a district,
Yeah, it can be moved into a district the way I had it.
right?
I think what you changed was resource from structure.
Right,
all right, okay.
that's the only,
So just adding the, okay, so again, it's just going back to whether, how we define historic resource
Right.
structures and building. Okay. Okay.
Any further comments or questions? No. The last section is pretty straightforward. Ordinary maintenance permitted public safety, an A and a B subsection on how basically the chapter shall not be construed to prevent any ordinary maintenance or repair of any exterior feature in an historic district or in a historic landmark which do not involve alterations or changes in the exterior feature of the building. For the purpose of this ordinance, changes made in the color of an exterior surface of a building are considered to be ordinary maintenance repair. Paint. There you go. And in public safety, nothing shall prevent the construction, reconstruction, alteration, restoration, or demolition of any interior or exterior feature which the city building official shall certify is required for public safety because of an unsafe or dangerous condition. But any such actions shall be, where possible, in accordance with the design guidelines and design criteria set forth in Section 3113, Design Guidelines, and Section 3114, Design Criteria. And that,
I had one curious question, and it might be addressed
Sure.
in 3113 or 3114. And sorry if I'm not
No.
there yet, but disability ramps. So if there's a ramp that's required for somebody who lives in their own home for a change of health and different things, how is that addressed? How is that alteration addressed?
I think they have a
What-
way for that.
We
don't
have
they?
some design guidelines for
Is
ramp.
that in the design guidelines? That's what
Yep.
I wondered. Okay.
I think there's a way that,
Yep.
that
I
yeah,
assumed that
because that's
13 or
exactly.
14, I just didn't know.
You
Yeah,
have to be
yep.
able
We,
to-
we have it
yeah.
under design guidelines, under alterations.
Okay.
Okay, so I would suggest then for our next session, in the next couple of weeks, the committee will contact city staff and set up a time to meet and go over section 3111, the certificate of appropriateness, the application for a certificate of appropriateness. And maybe even, it's fairly short, maybe we even do that section 12, which is the Secretary of Interior Standards for Rehab, which basically is kind of a de rigueur kind of piece of information that guides a lot of rehabilitation for historic structures that the city just has as part of their city ordinance. So we could kind of get those two things cleared and then prepare for the design guidelines and the design criteria sections, which are the next biggies.
So when will the discussion on definitions take place? Is that happening in the committee?
Well, I would say when we get together with city staff, that's when we can maybe talk about, how do we want to approach this for the definitions? And we could maybe bring it to the,
We were, Eloise and I talked about this.
sure,
And we thought maybe the next meeting would be a good meeting to just talk about the definitions.
just do definitions before we go any further. How does the commission agreeable? Yeah,
Sounds fine.
Okay,
yep, that sounds good. We'll just do the definitions and
okay.
that way we can proceed a little easier. Okay. So the next item on our agenda is the review of the work plan 2022. And I asked at our last meeting if we could include that. We prepare a work plan annually as part of our certified local government status. And typically we look at it, I think, November, December, and then vote on it in first part of the year. And Eloise or Ray sends it to the state. And basically it lets them know as a certified local government by the state that we have, something that an agenda, that we have something that we want to see for furthering historic preservation in our community. So the copy that you received is what we approved earlier this year for our 2022 work plan. And primarily there's about, let's see, 4 different areas. Educate the public concerning the value and benefit of historic preservation. Promote economic development and a vitality of the city through historic preservation. Enhance municipal policies to protect historic resources and implement policies through identification, effective legislation, and effective regulatory measures. And the final one is to continue to use the Ames Comprehensive Historic Preservation Plan as our working document. So under those goals, we had different activities that we were proposing for this year. And frankly, we've done quite a bit of them. This was not something that some of it we had applied for the grant. I don't think we, at the time when we were first looking at this, whether we had gotten word that we had received it or not. But to educate, I would say we've pretty much achieved most of the tick points under educate the public concerning the values. I think one of the things that we had looked at was to seek speakers for presentations of timely preservation topics in Ames. Last year in the fall, we did a walking tour on tax credits at the Main Street thing, which was very well received and very informative. And we were thinking maybe there's another topic area that we want to bring to the community that would be helpful. One of the things that we just, as kind of as a side piece, is that Eloise said that a membership to the National Historic Preservation Commission Association has been turned in, and we are now officially members. We haven't actually gotten anything from them yet, but we have access to the resources, and they do often topic areas and workshops and stuff like that. That might be something to look at to see if they have something that would be useful to our community. So that's still open as a possibility. And if anybody has any ideas and would like to bring something forward at the next meeting, or they think might be some ideas that we could do this fall, we still have time that we could probably arrange for something. So keep that in the back of your mind. We can talk about that in August. Promoting economic development. Now, this is the one we did the tax credit availability presentation last year. We have it down. I don't know if we meant to do it again or if there was another way we wanted to do that, but it is a tick point under promoting economic development. And then the second tick point is continue doing our certificate of appropriateness in a timely manner, which we had our first one for this year last month. So, but that might go with the tax credits. That might be something. If we meet with the residents of the Chautauqua Park, Ridgewood Park this fall, as we're anticipating, to kind of give them a preview of what the survey results are for their neighborhood area that we'll be submitting for the intensive survey. That might be an opportunity to talk about tax credits for historic properties, as potential. This would be a whole new group that might have a deep interest in that. So that's something to think about carrying forward. Enhancing municipal policies. We just are working on that. So we continue to do that. And sounds like we'll continue through this rest of this year, trying to plow through some of that. We have, we'll hear about an update on the historic survey here after this shortly. So that's in progress. We've worked with city staff to revise the downtown. Basically, we listened to comments. We just basically heard a presentation and comments. Not that we really provided anything, but basically listened for feedback on the downtown facade grant. We are interested, though, And I guess the second round of facade grants goes forward this fall. I think the second,
They've already posted it, I think.
Have
I saw
they?
on the city website, yeah.
okay. So that would be something, would be of interest. That, the applicants or who, what kind of continued work is going forward on that. It's certainly done a lot to help the businesses on Main Street. Working on Chapter 31, doing that. So continue to use the Ames Comprehensive Preservation Plan as our working document. That still is, I think one of the things that we looked at is we wanted to maybe be a little more comprehensive, also see what role the historic preservation can be in the climate plan that's coming forward and something like that. So I think we've done a lot this year. I think the big thing is whether we want to have a presentation this fall beyond what we do with the residents, with the neighbors, if there's something else. But if anybody has any ideas, please bring them forward. So percolate on that a bit. But I think, I don't know if Rosemary and you, Jesse, obviously weren't part of when we were developing our work plan for this year, but again, we'll be doing this annually. So we'll start talking about this end of the year and be coming up with ideas for 2023 here.
And some of these will continue, I'm sure.
Yes, absolutely. It's kind of an ongoing process. And I think that's mostly what the state wants, is they just want to see that you're active
Mhm.
moving forward. So,
Yeah, I think one thing that we didn't apply for a grant for this grant cycle.
no.
But I think we should try to do more intensive level surveys in other areas of the city. I think we're way behind in that, this city. And it's something that I know that the State Preservation Office likes to fund those too. So I think that's something we need to look towards, putting that on the work program for the work plan for 2023.
Maybe this fall, maybe September, October, maybe we're kind of looking after we get further, through the completion of the intensive survey. Think about what for the next year we would want to apply for as another certified local grant. I mean, we were the second largest grant they awarded for this year. And so it's obviously they felt it was a worthwhile project. And I think we have other worthwhile projects. So we maybe I'll start looking early this year, maybe October at the latest, so that we can discuss it in November, December, and get some ideas of what we wanted to jump in on for 2023. The application process, certainly, we got notice, I think, in June that they were opening the grant process for this coming year. So if we get into our work program by February, we'll be in good position to apply for the 2024 money next summer. So always thinking ahead here. Yeah. But yes, I think we definitely are getting some good feedback that the state is interested in our surveys and potentially revamping our design guidelines. That's another thing that could definitely get a little more improvement. So, any other things? Any other comments about the work plan that they?
The designing the guidelines will naturally flow from the Chapter 31 discussion, because a lot of the sorts of things we refer to touch on them. So.
Right. And I think what we had looked at, even if we didn't apply for a grant, Ted, before he left, talked about, working in a partnership with ISU to basically kind of a workshop format. They have students in history, architecture, landscape, who could all participate in looking at our design guidelines, formatting it in a way that would allow what we also wanted desperately was visuals, some pictures, show us what you're talking about, things like that, which could definitely add a more enhanced product to our design. We can't add pictures to the ordinance, but we can have a complementary or tandem document that would most certainly elaborate on what the ordinance has.
It would tie in with our commitment to collaborate, and also it would be a lovely project for the students.
Oh, I think they would
A
be
real world.
closer to the information, and it would be very real world, very real world. So,
Yeah, Ray, I had talked to Ted about a studio, a special studio with ISU students to work with the city on design guidelines. Has the planning department ever done anything like that before? I'm not sure what the process would be, but if a group, if it was a studio where the project for that semester was to complete design guidelines for the city, it would be both residential and commercial design guidelines, and come up with and produce a document that would be for use by the city.
Yeah,
Is-
we haven't done anything like that. I mean, I think it's been talked about before, but we haven't actually done it. But certainly something we could consider.
Okay, yeah, because that's kind of what I checked with him before he went off to Norway to see if that was a possibility, so we could kind of start discussing it, and that it would maybe be a project for I can't remember if it would be as early as next spring or semester or not, but it would be something he could start working on at the university anyway, within his department. So anyway, that's kind of the idea that
Yeah,
we were
yeah.
working on. So
we could talk to Ted more about that.
yeah,
So again, we'll maybe on our next, we'll touch base then on potential work plan ideas for the fall, maybe in our next agenda. If anybody thinks of stuff or come forward, keep that in mind. That'll be something that we can kind of elaborate on for next month. Item number 7, CLG grant update. Mary Jo, I'll let you do that.
well, the project's going really well. Finally. The two students that are working on the project, they've completed all the photographs of all the buildings in both areas, both subdivisions. They've done a ton of research, background on the historic context, in getting an idea of what is already written about the history of Ames and what applies to that district. The part of I should bring an inventory form in, so because probably a lot of you haven't seen it, but it's about a 3-page inventory form for each building, and the part of that is writing a description of the building, and that's a real challenging part to do, because you need to in the description pretty much define the character defining features of each property, define when it was constructed, and what are its significant features. So that's probably about 60% complete on the descriptions for all the buildings in the district. And we're looking forward to having a meeting in September, I believe is when we decided would be a neighborhood meeting. So we can kind of inform the residents of, give them some information about the history and the research project, and probably something about the state tax credits, and kind of give them an overall idea of what we're doing and what the benefits would be for them to be to take the next step and become a district, a historic district.
And of course,
So-
all commission members are invited.
Yeah,
Yeah,
all
certainly.
the commission members will be invited to that.
Has it been marketed or put out there yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
We were coming up with some ideas for dates. It'll probably like late
Yeah.
September-ish.
The city did send out a notice to residents that we were doing the
Oh, okay.
survey. So they were aware there were people in the
Maybe somebody-
neighborhood looking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, I don't think there's anything else.
They've been
that's,
working pretty hard on the research and the writing part primarily, and it's been, but there has been interest as Marion has gone out in the street, doing photographs of the houses and stuff like that. People have come out and talked to her and asked, about what she's doing and stuff, and so there is interest of what's going on. So I think Eloise, when we were talking about meeting with the neighborhood and potential dates, Eloise is going to see if she could look at some locations where we might have a public meeting too, would be a convenient place for people to meet, things like that. So anyway, we'll have more probably by August.
Right.
August
And,
meeting.
and I think we'll probably have them give a presentation at the end to the commission as well. So,
Mhm.
And give us a chance to thank them because they sounds great. And thank you to, you all and
Mary
Mary
Jo
Jo
has
for putting
done
so
that.
much into this.
Yeah.
Going above and beyond, that's for sure.
It's been very fascinating. It's like when we meet on a weekly basis or try to, to kind of just make sure we're on track and stuff. And as they talk about the information they've come across, it sends me into rabbit holes over at the Ames History Museum, like, oh, I got to look this up, see what's going on, and things like that. I mean, it's just been, Eloise says she's been looking up, permit, ancient, utility permits and stuff like that. I mean, it's trying to figure out, it's a sleuthing job, as anyone who's done housing research,
I was going to ask, where do you get the date of the building from? Official sources or?
there's several places.
Uh-huh.
There's what's that database?
The Beacon
The Beacon.
is
That
one.
has it's not very accurate, but it gives an idea. And so they've started with that. But going through county records and.
Oh, so it's
Yeah, they did go out
research.
to.
Mhm,
Mhm.
Yeah.
And you're in a prime location, when you doing volunteer work at the museum. I mean, a lot of the stuff over there, we did a field trip over there, and a lot of the stuff that they have, and the directories and things like that, have just been wonderful. I mean, we're very fortunate names to have a very well, developed historic society. So.
Yeah, there's been a lot of research into period newspapers too that have brought out some really fascinating things. So about it, it's
Very easy to get sidetracked.
Oh,
It is. I mean, there's.
it's the worst when you're a history
Yeah.
person. Yeah. So, okay. Commission comments. Anything people have noticed or updates or?
Well, I was going to say this is not really historic preservation, but it is livability and usability. If any of you haven't been down there recently, downtown Ames organization got a grant to buy tables and chairs, which was something I suggested actually
Yay. Yes.
at that big idea meeting, although I'm sure other people did too. And they've started to spread tables and chairs around Main Street. And I'm noticing with every passing week, they're in use more and more, as I suppose people. So, which is terrific.
That's
So,
wonderful.
yeah.
I've sat in them twice.
Oh, maybe I've seen you. You sit in the feathers.
Kellogg.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's where I live. I live in the Sheldon Mud.
Yeah.
And actually, the plaza area, if you've seen after the mess of construction that went on a long time because the Sheldon Mun was redoing a water
Oh.
pipe, and it was and very noisy. But as I live in the front, but the benches are going to come back. The city is currently restoring them,
Good.
and the benches will come back, but they're going to be put in a more conversational structure than they were,
Oh.
which was like an L, and then with the tables and chairs, and the downtown Ames have done the tables and chairs, as I said. The Sheldon Mun is going to take responsibility for planters with upkeep. The downtown Ames are providing them, and the Sheldon Mun will upkeep them. So it's
Very
so I
nice.
just wanted to, since I live on Main Street, I
Yeah.
wanted to promote that.
That's
So,
wonderful. I had a question regarding the emails that were going back and forth regarding the potential of the pool being put in Brookside
Oh, yes.
and how that affects this project that we're working on. And does it affect it? Yeah.
actually, just to say though, you may have something official. I watched the live council meeting. There's another one tomorrow where they discussed it, and Brookside wasn't really seriously being considered. They're focusing on other areas, partly because the site is hilly and small, and it just wouldn't work. And that was quite soon after those emails and
Yeah.
our
Okay.
letter.
I was just curious because to me, that would be a big impact right next to.
It would be.
Yeah.
It would be. But when you looked at the research, the staff comments and stuff, it seemed like the lesser of the choices. You know, they have to
Okay.
put out everything as a potential possibility. So, but yes, the Friends of Brookside were quite concerned. And so I'm hoping, though, they may come to our public meeting, though, about the neighborhood, because I think they would find it complementary to their own interest in the park aspect as well. So,
And good that you responded so quickly in terms of building
Oh.
the relationship between the commission and
Yes.
the neighborhood in light of the project.
so hopefully we'll see if this, adds to our connections,
Yep.
Good point. So, anyone else? No? Staff comments?
Good to be back.
Yay! Good to
Been gone
see
for a
you.
while, but, yeah. So Eloise has done a great job,
She has.
She
taking
has.
on everything with historic preservation while I've been gone. So tonight I was glad to fill in for her part too.
Well, we're in capable hands with this, with our, the staff that we work with. So we really appreciate the work that you all are willing to follow through on all our questions and stuff. So
Oh, thank you.
it's mutual.
I'll pass that on to Eloise.
Yes. So if there's nothing further, we've got some ideas for next month, and we certainly had good discussion on this one. I'll adjourn the meeting of the commission.